hello at home. We'll get started now. And we've got a class going on here as well. So I'll be talking to both of you. And occasionally, if I have to swap things over, you might see a fun inception of me in the camera behind the camera, and it'll be lots of fun. So we did that during testing. But today we are here for the fourth and final masterclass for finding new outlets for your brand. For content marketplace, sorry. And this one is on finding new outlets for your brand. And before we get started, a couple of the things that we always talk about, some things that you're going to need, certainly something to write on, thinking about a content concept that you've been working on over time. And if it's vague right now, that's okay. And we're actually this time going to ask people to think about several different recent content concepts, because it is about you and your brand, which generally is about more than just one concept. So as we're talking more today, it's going to be a lot about us really identifying and being really clear on what kind of content and what sorts of concepts really speak to us. Because you'll notice, hey, as we're looking at, oops, the way that these have progressed, we started off very much the idea of what is your hit factor? Like, why is it that you bring a special voice to something? And when we're talking about your brand, that is all over your brand is your hit factor. What about this content gets you passionate? Because that's also going to be the stuff that you're going to be most excited to dive into and put hours and hours and hours of work into. Because yes, as we were discussing before we started rolling, you know, for a while, a lot of this content doesn't actually pay you, right? So you've got to be really passionate about it. So we'll get started with that. Also, this is the fourth class. So if you've got, whether you have your notes with you or whether you just draw back, because I'm going to oftentimes say, hey, remember that thing that we talked about in class 2. Remember that work that you did when you answered this question. If this happens to be your first class that you've been in, that's okay. I am going to repose the pertinent questions, and they can write those down, do a lot of thinking. We're going to have time in this class to do some workshopping and brainstorming, but of course, like, it's a 1-hour talk. You're not going to solve all of your brand identity issues in this 1 hour. So what we're going to actually do is start to think about things. And then there's going to be a lot of work to do when you go home thinking about the next steps and diving a little bit deeper. All right, so reminder, content is, oh my goodness, it's this weekend. Like, it's so exciting. So, yeah.
Photos of the...
Absolutely, yep, feel free. And this will be available online too. So, but this content is coming up this Thursday and Friday. We are less than a week away, the 3rd and 4th. It's a 2-day conference, and I am getting really excited because I put a lot of work into it. Lots of other people have as well, and we're really excited to bring this to Miami and share this with everyone. So, all right, and let's see here. Also, the whole point of it is everyone who's coming into this is a content creator in some ways. A lot of people don't give themselves enough credit for being a content creator. Some people have done it on a bigger scale or longer time than others, but pretty much everybody creates some amount of content. And if you're really serious about that and wanting to kind of elevate yourself then to a content entrepreneur, that is actually what content stands for, is content entrepreneurship. So we're looking forward to talking more about the business sides of creating content and how it becomes something that you're not just doing at your desk, you know, every Tuesday afternoon to get your blog or your podcast out. It is about, okay, we've done that for a while now, or I maybe just be starting to do it, but I want to see a future. I want to see that this is something that can make me money. All right. And we've had a whole series of master classes. They really have been built upon each other. And so today I'm actually going to bring up a lot of things that we talked about in other ones. Be like, remember how you identified that in understanding your audience? Well, let's build on that today as we're starting to think much more about our brand. And then just 4 or 5 days from now is when we actually have the marketplace. And we're really excited because there's a lineup of amazing speakers that are coming to this. One thing that I do really want to encourage people to do is one of the very cool things that we're doing at our first content marketplace is actually doing a pitch session. And so when people maybe have some ideas that they'd like to grow, turn into something bigger, you have a chance to come and give your very brief pitch. You can bring some media and other things, but you can talk about it to some of the industry who are going to be there and get really good feedback on what is working about your pitch, what's working about your idea. Maybe there are other things that are similar out in the marketplace that you've worked with. That's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if they're really successful, but to understand how to differentiate. The chance to pitch your ideas in front of people is so rare. And so people are, especially because so many folks are coming in from outside of Miami, you want to have the chance to really be able to take advantage of that. And so there will be signups on the first day, and it is a session at 2 p.m. on the second day. There's only about 7 or so slots. And so we really are trying to encourage people to get in there and be excited about pitching content. So wanted to give everybody a heads up so you can start thinking about that. All right, so let's dive into finding new outlets for your brand. All right, so first off is that idea of what is your brand? Well, that's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? Hopefully it's a $1,000,000 question. Maybe it's a $10,000 question, but I could use 10,000 extra dollars too. So let's talk about the fact that everybody has a brand. Okay, most people just don't necessarily know what it is. Some amount of this is just simple self-awareness. You, aside from your content, if you think about it, just even have a brand when you are at your work. Even when you're in your family, you know, you're the one who everyone wants on the Trivial Pursuit team, or you're the one who makes the best dinners. Like you bring a family brand, right? Like everybody knows that you have an identity and a thing that you do well and a thing that they appreciate you for. When you're thinking about your content, it's that same sort of idea. What do you think about, what do other people think about you? What are the things that you're putting out there? And to be very self-aware is great because that helps you target existing people who are already going to be fans, people who could be fans, and also thinking about ways that over time you might evolve your brand a little bit to be able to reach slightly newer audiences. So with that, think about the fact that your brand is really a blend of 3 main things. It is you and your most notable qualities, the things that people admire you for, all of that. Definitely the content you create and publish, particularly in this context that we're talking about today. What kinds of content are you putting out there? What topics are you discussing? And your brand is also very much about your audience and how they consume the things that you do. The why does your audience consume your content is really the core of your brand. All right, so as we dive a little bit deeper into this to help you refine it, because one thing we really want to do today is that everybody is part of this, have a draft of their personal brand statement, their content brand statement. So, all right, remember things we talked about in the very first session, then your hit factor. The fact that you are indeed unique. One thing, if you have not done this already, is on the website. If you go, you can get just putting in your name and email sends you the #1 secret to the great show pitch. This is an excellent worksheet. It's like 4 pages long, really easy guided stuff that talks about a lot about how you pitch things. It talks about you and it talks about your brand. I would really encourage you after this, if you have not done this already, to get this and work through it. If you have, some of these things that we're about to talk about might come a little bit easier to you. But definitely it's another resource that's added on top of all these master classes that will help you get ready for Content Marketplace, but also even more importantly, help you succeed in the future as you're looking for ways to build your content and your brand and your content empire that we know we all are capable of making, right? So go to that, make sure to find it totally free. All you have to do is just sign up. There's a little pop-up box. All right. And so the key questions though from that I want to pull out here today. Think about this, and we'll go through these first ones pretty quickly. But what do other people say are your greatest qualities? I think when you start to think about your brand, again, a lot of it is self-awareness. Other people are very aware of you in a way that you are not always aware of yourself. You can be aware of your own intent, but you may not be aware of what people see on the other side. What do they hear? What are the things that really come across and resonate with them? This is a question you do not have to answer yourself. I would really encourage you to grab a few people who you trust. It's probably not your mom. It's probably not someone who's super close to you and won't give you an honest feedback, but it may be a coworker or your boss. It may be someone that you have creatively collaborated with in the past. It might be a business partner or that sort of thing. It might be a teammate if you're on a softball team and you just get a sense of like, okay, what do other people say are the things that they most like about you? That's a way easier question than what do they least like about you. Lots of people will tell you what they most like about you. Other people may run away if you say that. They'll go, I don't want to tell you that one thing, but this is the good, easy question. So ask people. All right, then this is all about you. What do you actually feel really confident doing, talking about? There are some things that we actually all know that over time, we've all gotten to be really good at. Or even if we're middle good at, we know enough about it that we can speak about it with ease. This could be a whole bunch of things. So keep this in mind. When we're talking also about the sphere of content, this might be your understanding of baseball statistics. This might be your ability to cook a really good lasagna. This might be your ability to match your, accessories with your outfit extremely well. So there are a whole bunch of things that you feel very confident doing, but it's a very individual thing. Okay? It's probably though something that relates to your passion. Because over time, you tend to become better at the things that you really love to do. But it is really good to acknowledge that there may be some things that you're really good at that you don't actually like to do that much. You've been forced to become good at them for one reason or another, but that doesn't mean that that's the kind of thing that you want to dive into because it may not necessarily show your passion. These things right here, though, start to speak very much about your brand. So now let's shift this a little bit to your ideas. And what that says up there, list your last 3 creative projects. So I do want to take a moment for everyone to think about that for a second. In terms of, okay, maybe for you to think about the last 3 creative projects, you might go back 5, 7, 10 years. Maybe you've put this on hold and that's one of the reasons that you're doing this right now is because you want to get creative again. That's okay. If the thing that sticks in your mind the most is that art project you did in high school, write it down. That's okay because it's the thing that you remember, which probably says something. Okay, so ponder that. What are they? If I were to think about it, some of it for me is actually helping to put on this conference, putting on these master classes. Like there's a creative side of this that I go in and I think about. But not everybody tends to think about teaching a class as being something very creative, but I know it is. So definitely open your mind to what those might be. You might have done something really creative on a work project, even if right now you're just getting into blogging. It may not be about that project specifically. Okay. Then as you think about them, what elements do those things start to have in common? So once you list them, what are the things that you can start to see they all get drawn out? Maybe it's that they all deal with a certain subject matter. They may all be about your love of fashion. They may all be about, your love of sports, your love of cooking, your love of travel. There may be some similarities there, but it also might be about the way in which you conveyed them. They might have been, you know what, I really love writing. And so these are all written forms. I write scripts, I do blogs, I do other things like that. I worked on a short story. So they may all be about you really liking to take the time to think about things and put them down and edit and go through a process like that. Or they might have all been impromptu. Maybe you're a stand-up comic. Maybe you like to do podcasts where it is very much more about, yeah, we plan and we prepare for this, but some of it's just stuff on the fly. Think about both subject matter and the way they're delivered, the how you prepare for it, because those are also part of probably why you're passionate about them, because then you really want to think about what draws you to those concepts. What draws you to the things that are similar? Because part of it, again, this may sound, you might be like, oh, this is getting weird, touchy-feely. Yes, this is all about self-awareness, and this is about like your brand and how you come off and how you're going to be the most successful is so much about your self-awareness and so much about your ability to really understand why you are drawn to making certain things. Like if you like to make content for other people, like that comes up a lot with folks. We have a lot of folks who are in advertising, who are maybe helping to create something for people who have an idea, but they can't bring it to fruition. And you're like, I love your idea and I'll take it and run with it. That's a really valuable skill too. These don't have to all be things that have been incepted by your brain. They can absolutely be things that came from somebody else's great idea that you took to fruition, because maybe you're more of a person who gets it done, or maybe you're more of an idea person. All of this is the awareness factor about what your brand is. Okay, these are just things to get your brain thinking and opening up to be more self-aware, more self-reflective. So let's move on and talk also about the fact that when you look at that list of things and the types of content that you make, there really is a situation when you start to think about your brand where you have to also recognize that for everybody's brand, some of it is about you and some of it is about your content. And if you think about certain brands that are out there, I'd say two fairly well-known and obvious examples. If you were to think about something like Kim Kardashian. Okay, Kim Kardashian's brand is really all about her. It's not content she's creating, because the content she's creating is about her. It's about her and her lifestyle. It's about her attitude. It's about her family. It's about her clothing, all of those things. But she is very much at the center of her brand. Now, on maybe a somewhat different end of the spectrum, while of course he doesn't go completely away from this, you think about a person like Stephen King. Okay, his brand is about his content. It's all about, okay, a horror that tests people and it feels real and uncomfortable. And his name is a name we know, and he is of course part of his brand. But the brand he has built is much more about the content he has produced. There is a similarity to the types of content. People know what to expect when they're going to buy a book by Stephen King or watch a movie that's based on Stephen King's work. But both of those though, are very kind of well-known and recognizable brands. One is just much more focused on the person themselves, and the other is much more focused on the content that they're creating. So you want to think, though, about you when you're looking at the content that you've made. What is it that people are tuning into? This is a spectrum, okay? It is not an either or. Like I said, Stephen King, that name means something, but it largely means something because of the content he makes. So you want to think about, where do you sit on this spectrum when you think about why people tune into you? Are they tuning into you and your content because it is you? Or are they tuning into it because your content is really interesting and it taps into something? It may be that you're kind of right in the middle. It's like you have a good personality, fun, quip, very self-reflective and self-diminishing kind of thing, where you can put out all of your dirty laundry and say, yeah, you know what, I make mistakes and I own them. And you do that in such a way that people are disarmed by it. But meanwhile, they're also looking at your fashion blog So you can show them your bad versions and your good versions. And maybe that's fun because they're both tuning into the fashion, but they're also tuning into you. In many ways, though, you might be something that's more on the content where it's not as important that you're the one presenting this to people. It's more about what's being presented versus is it more that it's about you, that you are presenting something, what you're presenting matters less. You want to think about that and also think about where you're at right now and maybe where you want to be. Would you like to be more forward? Would you like to be more of a persona on camera or in a blog or on your Twitch stream or what have you? Or would you actually love for your content to just take off more? I think a lot of people can be drawn to sort of the fame of being known and being on camera, but also a lot of people might like J.K. Rowling's money. So, you could actually invent Harry Potter. It's less about you, even though she's become a persona in and of herself, and it's more about the content, versus Oprah, who can, at any given show, talk about anything and people will tune in because she is charming as all get out. And they love her perspective and they just feel like she gets them. Okay, makes sense? She puts out great content, but the subject matter changes constantly. Has some similarities. She tends to focus on women. She tends to focus on things that matter to them, things that balance maybe family, career, other issues. But again, you want to think about where that sits. Really important. All right, cool. So then the other thing that we talk about is your ideal fan. And this was something that came up in the Know Your Audience. This was in class 2. We came up with your ideal fan avatar. We actually asked you to make a person, like write them down, give them a name, give them an age, where do they live, what do they do for a living, what do they like to do? Who is the person that you are making your individual content for? Now, this may change project to project. It probably should. But broadly speaking, then, you're making content for generally certain types of people. Think about what they're looking for in their content. And also, how will that person enjoy your content? Will they view it on a phone? Will they view it on their laptop? Do they want to go search for it on YouTube? Are they looking on Twitch because that's where they're at all the time? Are they just Instagram? Are they very cutting edge and they're always the first 1 million people to download the new social media app and you always want to be on top of that? Okay, then, and this is a question that you may be able to answer now, but it really deserves thought because this really starts to get to the heart of what your brand is. What does your ideal fan actually think about your content? Like, what would they say about it? This really also helps you define, is your brand more about you or is it more about what you're producing? When other people start talking about it, A, that's a good thing, but B, that's the truth. That's how people realize it. Okay. Lots of things to think about. Things that this was supposed to be a barrage of questions, so it gets you thinking about your content and your brand. So now we're going to take a few minutes for everyone to draft a brand statement. Now that we've thought about these, this doesn't have to be the final thing. This is putting something down on paper now so that you can go back and revise it over time. Okay, so starting off with, it may be you, it might be your company because maybe you own something, you're in a partnership with other people, what have you, or your projects, because again, maybe it's more about, maybe you're more of a Stephen King, who makes horror, okay? Where's your brand? My company, or my projects. You decide which one's appropriate for you. And then some sort of action word. What is it that you want to do with your content? Do you just want to reach lots of people? Do you want to inspire them? Do you want to entertain them? Do you want to make them laugh? Like, what is it that the core purpose of your content is about? You can provoke them. Lots of talk radio is all about putting things out there and provoking folks. And now podcasts made that so much more accessible, and a lot of people are doing it. Okay, or maybe it's much more about amusing them. Okay, think about what that might be. And then, who is your existing audience? So I inspire 30 to 55-year-old women who live in Texas by or with the thing that you are passionate about or do well that people know about you and your work. So all those questions we just asked. And again, if you just want to write this down and go back and take notes and make sure you do it. But I do think a possible way, or a draft of this, a possible way that it may come together is really good to just write down to start. Because one of the mottos that started back at class number 1, and it's going to come up again here, just make something. You know, putting down a draft is really important. So make sure that you're putting something down. Again, I want to talk people through this, and I'm just going to give you a minute. Is it about you? Is it about your company? Is it about your projects? What kind of impact do you want to have on folks? Who are those people? And what do you think, given those other exercises we've just gone through, the sort of thought exercises, what is that thing about your content that you love, but that is also the thing that is recognized by other people? I'm just going to give you like another 20 seconds to kind of write something down. I'm going to take a sip of water. Okay, let's go ahead. And now we have a brand statement. Honestly, folks, that's a big step. Like being self-aware enough to start thinking about what it is that your content means. You know, how do people enjoy it really matters, because it's not you, it really forces you to get out of your head and be less stressed about what you are making and kind of the piece by piece of it, because we can all get overwhelmed by that. And remember the why you're making it. And that's much more about your brand. So revisit this every once in a while. And if you're being honest about this and it's not exactly what you'd like it to be, it's also something that you can change over time. If right now you're known for, you know, playing video games and swearing a lot and being super violent about it, and you've gotten to a point where maybe now you've got kids and you don't really want that to be your brand anymore, you know what? You can always change it. You can do so suddenly, or you can gradually just start to play different types of video games for people. You can make sure that you censor yourself more when you would like to say that 4-letter word, and now it maybe just feels less appropriate to you. All right, so it's always possible to change it. You want to check on this every 2 or 3 months to make sure that it's still there, because one of the beautiful things about creating content is creating content changes you. Like the process of creating things absolutely touches you, and it changes the person that you are. That's why I think it's awesome that there's so many people coming to Content Marketplace, because they're all excited to be creators, and it is a thing that is so transformative. The content that you create, that you created 5 years ago, is not the same content that you're creating now, and is not going to be the same content 5 years from now. I mean, I went to film school. I look at my student films and I'm like, oh God, what was I thinking? I thought that was amazing, but now it feels maybe simplistic for me, not just in its technical ability, but in the message I was trying to say. So I think over time, the beauty of it is it changes. So this will change as well. All right, let's look now at talking about new platforms. So you have a brand, and your brand can fit likely on a lot of platforms, but probably not every platform. And by platform, I think we want to think about this in a couple ways. One, it is the actual service, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or Twitch or Twitter or all the things that are out there. It could be on Tastemade, or it could be on, the podcast service of choice that you look at. Those are platforms in and of themselves. But within those, it's also the individual ways that you might be part of a collective of those things. So the platform in which you choose to be on Twitch, I actually know a lot of Twitch streamers, for instance, who get together and share content under one umbrella because they're rather similar and they want people to be drawn to it. It's a really good idea that if you find other people who are similar to you in this industry, there is room for a lot of people to be successful. So what they do is maybe there's 4 of them and they'll take Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and divvy it among themselves. And then on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they pair up differently so that there's always new content coming, sort of with an umbrella that suits their communal brand. Okay, each one of them is known for something a little bit different, but people know what to tune in for. And I think that's a really smart strategy. It's something that you can see working in a whole bunch of different media. Podcasts, certainly. You pair them up in certain places so that you know that you're looking for different things, or you get guests onto your podcast who might also have a podcast and you share back and forth. Great ways to have their network and your network connect. So that's what I also mean by platform, though. Is the platform out there a chance for you to partner up with other people? Okay, so let's dive into this a little bit. Who is your content audience? We just talked about this. The big question here is, where do they go for content? So you might actually have a blog, but you're not at all supporting that. Maybe it's a food blog. Okay, so you have a food blog. If you're not supporting that with pictures of the recipes that you make on Instagram, you're really missing out, because people who are generally interested in food blogs love pictures of food. Okay, or if you are a person who also has the food blog but could potentially actually show people and demonstrate the ways of doing this, you may be able to get a YouTube channel of you actually cooking things and starting to show how that's all coming together. Or maybe your food blog is much more about other people cooking things. Okay, can you start to do, again, a YouTube channel or other kind of video stream, or at least include videos within your blog that can link to some things on YouTube of other chefs putting stuff together. Again, doesn't always have to be you in front of the camera or in front of the microphone. That's not how content's actually generally made. So it's okay to think about it that way as well. But where do those people go? Your audience is probably not just on the main platform that you're servicing right now. So you want to think about their types of things. We're gonna go through a fun little example. So this is Lisa. Totally not Leah. We'll just call her Lisa. Okay, Lisa happens to, and this is true, have a Facebook page. So Leah/Lisa's Facebook page is called Flea Market Snob. You'll notice over here that it's got about 6,000 plus people who like it. This has been in existence for 6 or 7 years, so Lisa tells me. Mostly it's targeting women 25 to 50. Because this person lives on the West Coast and the flea markets they tend to visit are all up and down the West Coast, largely the audience is also West Coast as well. I can talk a bit more about how that audience was built. Largely it was because there was a time when I was doing very regular things. There was some amount of paid advertising, there's some amount of other stuff, but for the most part, it just came from referrals and people liking things that's going on. Okay, Lisa, over time, stopped actually posting. At a point, probably got to a place where there were 2 posts a week. Then it sort of dwindled. For a while came 0, and now it's gotten back up to 2 to 4 because someone's gotten excited about this idea again. Okay. I totally love flea markets. I think they're fun. I think they're awesome. I have a group of 6,000 people that, while that's not the millions of folks that follow some streamers that are out there, right? It's a consequential number. Like, it's a good number of people that I can reach with this. So I am now starting to think about, I have this thing there, and I'd really like to grow it a bit more. Up till now, I've only done Facebook, in large part because this started it started shortly after I joined Facebook. So now if I really think about it, it's probably 8-9 years ago that I started Flea Market Snom. Okay. I did it. I was very excited about it. Did it for a while, went away, but now I'm like, now I'm back in a place where I really love doing flea markets again. It would be fun to think about doing some other stuff with it and grow this. So let's talk about, okay, what advice would you give to this person who you've never met before, who might be interested in growing this onto something else? Like, all it is a Facebook page. What more could be done to sort of grow this brand?
Depending on her goal.
Mm-hmm.
Does she want to sell some of the products that she is
Ah.
buying? Does she want to get a commission from the sellers in the flea market?
Yeah, all of that's actually really interesting. Is there a monetization thing here? And I would say, heck, absolutely. I think there could be a monetization play or desire, because who doesn't want to make money if they're going to spend time doing something and really dive into it? Because at that point, it stops becoming a hobby. This was a fun hobby. Would I like to do more with it? Yeah, probably. Okay, so if that's the case, and I'm looking at, okay, women largely 25 to 50, largely West Coast, looking at, okay, obviously, it probably goes without saying that those people like flea markets. Other things that people like with flea markets are, okay, home decor, all these other pieces. If I were to look at that, one thing that I would give as advice to Lisa is the fact that, okay, not being on Instagram and Pinterest is silly. Like, that is the place where people go see the fun, cool, old rocking horse that's got chips of the paint, but people get super excited and they're like, oh, or the visuals of that and an understanding of, oh, this thing is coming up. Look what I found there last year. Hey, come and meet me at this particular flea market that's happening 2 weekends from now. Okay. Those are things that Instagram or Pinterest are really good for. Now, I think if you were to take it a little bit further, there is absolutely a real potential for things like a blog. Especially if I was interested enough to want to spend time to, say, find a thing at a flea market and then do something with it. And that could be a whole variety of things, because, take tips from current media that's out there. There are a couple shows. There's one called Flea Market Flip. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but it's on Home and Garden Television. I believe it's on HGTV. And a woman basically goes, and there's 2 teams. They get a certain amount of money. They go to a flea market. Then they spend a day making that stuff better, whatever that means. They might turn it into something different. They might repaint it. They might add some caster wheels and make its functionality change. And then they come back and they see what they can sell it for like a week later. And the one that's made the biggest profit wins. Okay, that's really interesting. So I could, if I wanted to, actually go show my improvement projects, because believe me, I find things that aren't quite ready to go in my house or somebody else's. But if I spend a little elbow grease on them, then they're there, and a good half of my house is furnished this way. Okay, so I could document that. I could do that in a blog. I could certainly do that in a web series. And you know what? If I make that web series, you could even think further, well, that person's on HGTV. Could I pitch it to other outlets? Okay, and that's how you start to see this thing growing from step to step. Or it could be the kind of thing where you say, You go to a different place and it is much more about, yes, purely the sale. It's not, how do I put it in my house? How do I make this thing that I love be something cooler and give it almost like a craft project to people? You could also do, how do you find this thing that's of value and clean it up in the right ways? I mean, you know, what was the, oh shoot, what's the name of the Antiques Roadshow that would come around, and the number of times that that thing was a sensation for a while on PBS, and people would bring in like the candelabra that they found in their grandmother's attic that they happened to like polish up, and they're like, oh my goodness, you got rid of the patina. And now it's worth only 10% of what it would have been had you just left it nice and dirty, right? We all remember, you're like, oh, wah, wah. But if you actually did something about, oh, hey, are you interested in this kind of collectible or article? Here's how you treat them. And you can talk about, okay, finding things that are maybe undervalued at a flea market and being able to sell them at a place that people value those kind of things. Okay, you could do something that way. There are so many ways that you could take it, build on what is a decent number of people, and be able to say, hey, I'm going to give you more content. If this were to just go out onto Pinterest and Instagram, I will guarantee you this number will go up a lot faster than if it's just sitting there on Facebook waiting for posts to be 2 to 4 times a month. The other thing I would say is that this person is really serious about it. Giving some advice to a person who's near and dear to me, you got to post more than 2 to 4 times a month before you start to get close. You know, especially if it's just Facebook. If you're making a podcast once a week, it's probably fine. If you're making a blog, as most of us know, the expectation is largely that you would do it faster. And especially if really what you're doing is focusing on much smaller social media things that are largely picture-based, like that's consumed like this. A person who's really serious about this is going to be posting at least 3 times a week, right? So that is just an example pulled from out of the air of something that is an opportunity. You know, there's a passion here. There's something that is already, there's a base of content. I probably have 400 pictures on this Facebook that I could start to pull from to make a blog. Thinking about that kind of thing and how you can start with what you've got and pull into other places, that's the little steps we can all take to start building that content empire that we all want. All right, so let's look at next. What about you? Okay, think for a moment. You have a blog, Facebook page, something of the sort. You may just have an idea. Okay, if that's what it is, I've got this scrap of paper that I took notes on in my what is my hit factor, and I came up with something I thought would be kind of cool. Okay, great, you have an idea. Okay, who does the idea serve? Where do they look for their content? And how can you, knowing that those people are going to be going to Instagram, how can you reach them there? Knowing that those people love YouTube and clicking through YouTube videos, how do you reach them there? With the fact that you have an idea that currently is not on YouTube. What incarnation of your idea actually makes sense for YouTube? Okay, again, my Facebook page about flea markets, I could totally make a, look, I found this cool thing. You want a coffee table? Here's how you make one out of a bench. Okay. And we could even do 3. How do you make a coffee tables out of a bench? I guarantee you I could probably do 300. How do you make a coffee tables out of a bench? People will get tired of this. Okay, but you get the basic idea after a while. But I could take this, make videos, and put that on YouTube, if that's where I think my audience is. But it's about thinking about how your content, your passion, can also translate to those areas. All right, so from there, how do you tackle a new platform? So, you know what? Lisa knows Facebook. Does she know YouTube? I don't know. How's she gonna figure it out? Well, there's a few things you would do. Trying a new platform, first, you know what? Researching the needs of working with that platform online is just crazy easy these days. You can find out the specifications. You can find out what you need to do to enroll. Okay, if it's just about an Instagram account, make an Instagram account. Just go do it and then get in and figure out all the bells and whistles, okay? Certainly tap into your creator network. And this is one of the things that I will tell everyone Content Marketplace is going to be best for, is giving them a network of other creative people in the area that they can start to know and trust and bounce ideas off of. So you are going to meet people who are already doing short form videos on YouTube and really know it. You can ask them those questions about, please give me some tips. Some of the talks are already going to be talking about that. That's excellent. But having that person who's there any given Thursday that you might have a question about what to do with your YouTube video is going to be invaluable. So make sure to talk to people at Content Marketplace, introduce yourselves, have discussions about what it is that you're working on. It's such a cool part of the whole experience. Okay, and then, told you it was gonna come up later, just make something. Okay, the first time I ever made a how-to video, it was awful. I will be honest, like it's never great the first time and it's not supposed to be. It sets a baseline and then it gets better every time you do it after that. You learn from it. You learn so much more from your mistakes than the things that go perfectly well, right? So just make something. Okay, if I want to launch a blog, just write the first one, then write the second one, then write the third one. Get feedback from some people and do it again. Okay, there's no substitute for doing it, ever. Do it. Anyway, okay, so let's move on a little bit to talking about brand partnerships. This is gonna be our last topic today. I know we're sort of getting close to wrapping up. We'll have time for a few questions and then we'll move on. But obviously, we all wanna make money with our content, okay? Reaching out to brands does take a lot of effort. So you wanna make sure that your time is worth it, right? So here's some things to think about. You definitely want to ponder what brands want to reach your audience. They might not be doing the same thing, okay? If you were to look at the flea market snob person, okay, yes, there are a lot of furniture, household brands. I'm sure folks that go to flea markets, for instance, a lot of times will do so because it's not that they just want to find the fun and funky thing, but they also want to find it on a budget. So a brand like IKEA might also be very appealing to people who are going to flea markets. But here's the thing about IKEA. Flea Market Snob currently has 6,000 followers, okay? Does IKEA care about my 6,000 followers? No. That is not going to be an impressive number to them. That is not the kind of thing that makes them really excited about stuff. So you also have to be realistic about people who are at a comparable scale. Now, of course, if I start doing some of those things we talked about earlier with Flea Market Snob, potentially I could grow that into 60,000, 600,000. Does that start to become something that IKEA thinks is interesting? Yes. 600,000 will at least potentially get, you know, an agent to have a discussion about that with the IKEA brand people. 6 million. So, but there are other places in my, you know, town that I live in. There are lots of maybe secondhand stores or people who actually run flea markets or other things that you can start to say, I tap into flea markets. I very frequently, as just a free service to people who come there, put together a calendar of local flea markets. Could I start charging a premium or doing things for extra placement or a specific blog post or potentially do a video that interviews various vendors that's at a flea market and get them to pay me? Potentially. Because that's on a scale that we are in sync, right? There's something where I can bring them because I've got a localized audience that cares about exactly what they're doing. That would be a discussion that would be worth potentially having. But here's the other thing, and I really need to stress this. Are you really ready to do what it takes to pitch to them? And that is like, if you look at the last thing that we talked about, are you going to do all the research you need to about them? Are you going to take the time to pull together your pitch, have the meetings? Some people just get very uncomfortable reaching out to other people to say, hey, I'd like to discuss this. Would you be interested in partnering on something? You have to get over that if you actually want to have brand sponsors. So you need to think about that. Okay. And here's the big thing. Your brand statement, remember we all have a draft of one now, should be appealing to whoever the sponsors are and align with theirs. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but your brand statement aligning with, does it align with IKEA? Well, maybe. Again, you probably aren't at the right scale, but does it align with the local flea market that wants more promotion? Yeah, I bet it really does. Okay, and from here, we are just going to recap and then I will take questions. So, reminder, we talked about the fact everybody has a brand. You might not know it, but it's really important that you do. Okay, so you need to know it. Your brand is always a combination of you, the content you make, and the people who consume it. Okay, and the way those all come together, we did that brand exercise, it involved all of those. Okay, I make content that wants to have this impact on these people using that thing that I am passionate about and that they know me for. Okay. The thing that is one of the really important reasons to know your brand is because being aware of it, absolutely, reminder, influences where you want to be, both because of your audience, but also because of the functionality of potentially the content, how much your ideas and everything align with what that technology and that platform can do. So you don't necessarily want to be on every platform because A, that takes a lot of time. Okay, and so you want to strategically pick where you would like to be. And it should be in line with your brand and your goals for what you want your business to do. And then new platforms can be scary. Just make something. Okay, that is the big thing that will come out of also Content Marketplace. You will hear this over and over again. In fact, our first panel is called Just Make Something. And it's about a bunch of bloggers telling you how they got into it. And it's gonna be fascinating. I'm super excited to go and listen to these people who've all been really successful in what they've done, but who've all been at the place where they were just getting started. Okay, and then so think about brand partnerships that are right for your scale and your audience. And brands with similar brand statements make great partners, and it may be you and IKEA, it may be you and that local flea market, or it may be you and other people who also like to do things with flea markets who combined can make bigger and better content together. Okay, those are equally good brand partners. Remember we talked about the Twitch streamers who they come together so that their channel has people putting out content regularly. Okay, finding those kind of brand partnerships also makes sense, and they're free. Okay, you generally can be just good win-win partnerships. All right, from that, are there questions?
Water, I get stuck all the